Listen local with Amelia Bernasconi
Amelia Bernasconi.
on ABC Upper Hunter Breakfast.
Well, if you nick your finger cutting veggies for tea, or maybe a little one grazes their knee, it's off to the Band-Aid cupboard, right? For the bigger things, though, it might be a trip to the emergency department for x-rays, all those sorts of things. But generally when it comes to physical injuries, we know what to do. We know where to go and who to ask for help. Mental health, though, can be a little more tricky. But there are some specialist mental health first aid trainers. You might have already been through a course like this, actually, because in the Upper Hunter, we're punching well above our weight. It's largely thanks to local mental wellbeing charity Where There's a Will and the connections they have made. They've been working with the likes of the Mental Health First Aid International organisation, and their Executive Director of International Programs, Dr. Jakqui Barnfield, is with us this morning. Hi, Jakqui.
Good morning, Amelia.
Thanks for joining us. It's a big space to be working in, and I know that you have a real passion for rural and regional communities like ours. How does your organisation operate in communities like that?
I think there's a real connection and a commitment back to where we started from, really. And as you pointed out, physical first aid is that sense of being capable of doing something really simple in the home, to look after someone when they've got it, as a cut or a burn, or that first step before anyone actually needs real professional help. And so our founders, actually 25 years ago this year, which is a really exciting year for us, decided they just completed a physical first aid course and thought, we have physical first aid, why don't we have mental health first aid? And, that exploration of what is it and what does it actually mean? In much the same way as physical first aid, it's a program, or we have many programs that are evidence-based, evidence-informed, that really equip everyday people. So they're not professionals, they're not counsellors. You don't have to be a doctor or a nurse, although you can be. But it's everyday people with the skills and confidence to recognise, understand and respond to signs of mental health problems or crises. Now, why is it important in regional rural communities? You guys know the best. You live in these communities and you know firsthand that there are higher rates of mental health problems, that there are fewer available services, and that there is potentially greater stigma and isolation. So we know that, in order to help bridge that gap that really exists, and, as I said, that limited access to resources, getting people in the local community trained up helps to bring the knowledge, the confidence and early intervention directly into communities.
Yeah, we've got Joe Lynch on the line as well. We'll bring him in shortly from Where There's a Will to take a look at locally how many people have been trained in this space. But Jakqui, your organisation has just launched the What's Your Why campaign. How will that run across July?
It's an amazing campaign where we're celebrating the stories. We've got over 1.5 million mental health first aiders trained in Australia. It's a big proportion of our population, which is really exciting. Now, despite having 10% of the Australian population trained in mental health first aid, we do remain one of the country's best kept secrets, and it's really time to change that. We're wanting our mental health first aiders to share their personal stories to help raise awareness that anyone can have and learn the skills that may save a life.
What are we talking about when we talk about skills in mental health first aid training? What do you learn?
You learn a robust action plan, and it's a simple thing, action plans, but it's obviously the training that goes alongside of it. So it's really about learning to increase mental health literacy. So there's some skills and knowledge base around that, but the skills really about how do you have a conversation? And it's having a mental health first aid conversation. They're not your usual, hi, how you going? It's actually being able to bring what you've observed and being able to actually have a supportive, empathetic conversation with someone and utilising the skills and knowledge that you've learned throughout the training to help guide and support someone to the help that they might need.
Dr. Jakqui Barnfield is with us this morning from Mental Health First Aid International. We also have Joe Lynch on the line. He's on the board of our local mental wellbeing charity Where There's a Will. Morning, Joe.
Morning, Amelia. How are you?
Very well. You've been trained in sort of the school context, and I know you've done a lot of work in this space, of course. Tell us a bit about why this has been such a priority for you before we talk more broadly.
Yeah, sure. I think the idea of that positive education, and we're aiming our young people at prevention strategies. I think mental health first aid just falls perfectly into that. We've got a generation of young people who are using positive psychology language, and we've got young people who are looking out for their mates. So just like any other first aid training, mental health first aid has been really positive for the young people in our schools. That's been extended into the community, into local businesses now, training their staff. So I think that idea of social change and changing that stigma around mental health is really important, and mental health first aid does that for us as a community.
It's been nearly a decade since Where There's a Will's been supporting people in this training space. Do you know how many locals are trained up in this yet, Joe?
So across the community since 2016, we've had almost 3,700 community members part of mental health first aid training, whether that be the teen mental health or youth mental health first aid that happens in schools, but also the standard mental health first aid training that happens across the community. So a massive number of people in our community have had access to this program. Obviously, through the support of Godolphin in the early days and then Bengala, the people in our community have been able to access this training largely for free, which is such a bonus.
And when we talk about mental wellbeing, literacy and mental health, I think the Upper Hunter, as a long-term local, I can see how the conversations have changed. And I know it was really important for you, Joe, when you moved up here, building a family and having this, when we talk about mental well-being, not so much mental ill health, but it's that focus on being positive and being skilled. That was really important for you when you came here, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. So when me and my family moved here, just almost 4 years ago, what was going on in the area was something that I hadn't seen before. The idea that well-being conversations and well-being strategies are being shared across schools, and schools aren't doing it in isolation. We're doing it together. Where we're meeting constantly to talk about best practice and sharing ideas with each other. And our young people in the community, they see each other on the weekends. They play sport together. So all those young people having that common language and that understanding of what good well-being is really important. As a community, it's not something I've seen in other places, and it's a real privilege to be a part of.
And what about you, Jakqui, if we come back to you, the likes of the Upper Hunter, are there other communities like this, or does it change your approach when your mental health first aid international teams do work in places like the Upper Hunter with the likes of Where There's a Will, that there's a bit more of a baseline understanding perhaps?
Yeah, it's really powerful when it is delivered as a whole of community approach. By putting essentially the delivery into local hands, it becomes community-led, it's community-owned, and the community itself is building strong circles of support that supports and reflects the needs of the real people on the ground. You know yourselves better than anyone else. So whilst we use the trainer-trainer model, it's really about empowering local organisations, local charities, delivering them across their own local communities. So Where There's a Will in the Upper Hunter is doing amazing things, but we've got other regional areas who have and follow a similar model, but the idea is really to be able to build that community groundswell.
What's your why? Can I ask you before I let you go, Jakqui?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all play a different role. I'm a mum, a daughter, a sister. I'm a work colleague. I'm a nurse. Now, my nursing skills I'm actually a mental health nurse, and my mental health nursing skills can hold me in good stead in clinical settings, but not everyone I talk to needs to have a mental health conversation. And what's really powerful about mental health first aid is that I can cut through a whole range of issues, conversation barriers, to be able to have a mental health first aid conversation with anyone, because it's a way of teaching and communicating using common language, and that's really important.
It certainly is. Like Joe was saying, there's been thousands of people locally trained up. What are the next steps? What are the opportunities? I'm not sure who wants to take on this question, but how can organisations, workplaces, charities, groups get involved and potentially look at setting up some of this training? Is that a local one for you, Joe, or Jakqui? Are you leading?
So I guess the next steps of Where There's a Will, we're really trying to train local workers who can deliver it here in our community. So that's come with its challenges. It's been tricky. We have people move on. That's a challenge. So we're coming together early next term with a group of teachers who work in that space to look at what's next and how we can continue to sustain things. And if we get that model right, then continuing that training in the schools, we're then building a generation that knows young people come into the workforce and they've got that literacy. They're then joining local business and companies, and they're understanding that, and we're encouraging sort of businesses and people in the community to step into this space as well. Obviously, it starts at the schools, and we found really great success there. We're now looking at sporting clubs, and we're looking at local businesses and people in the community to take that on as well and be trained in mental health first aid. So as a community, we can continue to change that stigma and change the trajectory of mental health in the area.
It's a huge task when you step back and say we're going to change mental health, people's approach to talking about it and how we deal with it. But in the Upper Hunter, it's certainly been done over the last decade, and I look forward to seeing what's next. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning to get into this. Dr. Jakqui Barnfield, the Executive Director of International Programs with Mental Health First Aid International. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Amelia.
Thank you. And before I let you go, Jo, I know you're a bit of a sports lover, and I spotted some rainbow socks on the junior rugby side that played in Newcastle last week ahead of the Wallabies game. How was that?
Where there's a will was represented out on the stadium in Newcastle. So we had the Scone girls playing at half time at the Wallabies Fiji game, and they were all wearing the rainbow socks, which was fantastic. And that's just on top of a range of where there's a will rounds that have happened, around our community. We've had it at the soccer, at the rugby league, to name a few, and it's just been fantastic. And not just teams from the Upper Hunter, but teams who are visiting, happy to purchase the socks, put them on, and have a conversation about positive mental health and well-being, which is really fun.
Yeah, well, wonderful to see them there at that international game between the Wallabies and Fiji last weekend. Jo, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really important to put a spotlight on what you guys are doing there.
You're welcome, Amelia. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Jo Lynch is on the board of our local mental wellbeing charity, Where There's a Will. You can get in touch with them if you think your workplace, your friend circle, get in touch with them if you want a bit of guidance there when we look at mental health